Whoop. Well, hello there folks, this is Liaj and welcome to a video for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. With this video, I will be starting up a mini-series discussing some of the new Silkbind moves added to the various weapon types in the Sunbreak expansion. Now, as you are likely aware, every weapon type has received a total of 2 new Silkbind moves plus a non-Silkbind switch skill, and many of these are proving to be amazing new additions to the weapons playstyles. However, depending on what weapons you've been playing around with, you may have noticed that some of these new moves don't seem to be quite as impressive as the others. For some weapons, it felt like they received nothing but amazing new tech, but for others, it may have seemed that there were a few abilities that weren't even worth using. So with this series of videos, I wanted to highlight a few of these abilities that may seem either unimpressive or simply overshadowed by some way cooler skills that share the same slot with them. I originally had a single video planned to cover a total of 5 of these abilities, but with the amount of mechanics I found through my research, I figured that each of these skills would warrant an individual video. In each of these videos, I will be doing a deep dive into a particular skill for a weapon, first explaining how the skill works as well as covering any less obvious tech that the skill enables. I will then follow with some clips from some hunts that I did applying the skill to a practical setting. My goal with these videos is not to convince anyone that these skills are necessarily amazing or even worth replacing other ones over, but instead I just want to shed some light on what could be possible if these skills are used effectively. So with that, let's get started and give these skills a chance. So the skill we will be covering in the first of these videos is the Backslide Silkbind for the Greatsword. We'll be starting things off with some basic info about the skill. The Backslide Silkbind goes in the switch skill slot for the input of left trigger and the right face button. This means that to equip this skill, we will be replacing the Silkbind power sheath. And before we've even seen what the skill does, we have run into our first problem. Power sheath is a buff that passively provides a bit of extra damage for the Greatsword. If we were to replace it, then that is damage we would not be having otherwise. I would however like to mention that I am not a very good Greatsword player, and I am also not very familiar with what is considered meta for the weapon. It is my guess that power sheath is something that is usually worth keeping active in order to maximize your damage, but I don't know if a good Greatsword user would dedicate the wire bugs to it or just use them to get their big attacks out faster. As a bad Greatsword user though, I often just forget to use Power Sheath, so it won't be a huge loss to me to equip Backslide anyways. I do attempt to compromise however, and equip Power Sheath on one scroll so I can in theory activate it and then swap to have Backslide ready. And then of course I will maybe do this once at the start of the hunt and never again, but that is probably just a me problem. So let's now finally take a look at Backslide. When performing the move, you will, as the name suggests, do a backwards evade with your wire bug. As you might expect, this move provides some decent invincibility frames, so its primary purpose is to let us dodge through attacks. However, the real value of this move comes from its ability to be performed while charging, or in the middle of a surge slash combo. Now, doing the backslide from a standstill doesn't give you anything special, just letting you do the first move of your combo afterwards. But now let's try using it while charging. After performing the backslide, we notice that our follow-up attack is now the strong charge slash. Similarly, if we backslide while charging a strong charge slash, our follow-up attack will then be a true charge or rage slash. So essentially this is a similar behavior to the tackle that we can perform during a charged attack, as the follow-up will be the next move in the combo. If you are a fan of the surge slash combo, we can notice that if we do a backslide after one of our combo hits, then the next attack we perform will be the following hit in the combo. This doesn't feel quite as fluid in my opinion, but since the surge slash combo doesn't let you perform tackles during it, perhaps this may be somewhat useful for avoiding attacks mid-combo. We can also see in this case that there is a pretty generous window for how long we can wait before performing the backslide and still follow up with the next hit in the combo. So if the timing for dodging an attack won't quite line up with your combo, don't be afraid to add in some pauses. And by the way, this same behavior still applies to the charge slash combo as well. After we throw out a charge slash, we get a similar window where if we backslide, the follow-up attack will be the next tier of charge slash. Alright, moving on, the rest I will cover will mostly just apply to the charge slash combos. All of my test hunts were done with the charge slash just because I haven't messed with the surge slash enough to know how to use it optimally. Anyways, up next, while charging a slash, you can slightly change the direction of your backslide with some directional input. Now from my testing, this can actually get a bit confusing and ended up being a bit more trouble than it was worth for me to use in practice, but let me see if I can break down how this works. So starting with the part that makes sense, if I do a slight diagonal backwards input, the backslide goes about where we want it. Okay, cool. Now let's try inputting left or right. Alright, in this case we are taken at about a 45-degree angle. We could assume that maybe there's a limit to how much we can adjust the slide, and I guess this would make sense because the move is not intended to be done in any direction. However, let me now try inputting forward. Okay, what the heck? That was almost 90 degrees to the side. So I think what's happening in this case is that my forward input is either being read as slightly to the right or slightly to the left. And when this happens, we get a slide that is still diagonal and backwards, but with a much sharper angle in that direction. I noticed that when I try to do a pure forward input, I can never consistently get the same direction. So if you want a sharp angle, I would recommend a input of slightly forward and to the left or slightly forward and to the right. Still, this kinda hurts my brain, so I don't end up doing it much in practice. Okay, with that tangent out of the way, let's get to the most useful part of the backslide. So originally, I did basically just think of the backslide as a backwards version of the tackle, which is why it didn't seem that exciting. However, the one big difference is that when you are charging an attack, the charge is preserved during the backslide. When I did my first few hunts with this skill, I didn't even realize this and ended up overcharging some slashes after sliding. But as it turns out, if your slash is fully charged, you can just backslide and let it fly. So we are still not done yet. I have one more technique that I would like to cover. Fun fact is that I had a script mostly written for this skill back when I planned to make this just a single video. But part of the reason I ended up splitting these up is that I kept learning new things that were possible with each skill, and what I want to share now is one of them. So for my original testing of this skill, I was running with the other new Greatsword Silkbind, Strong Arm Stance. I mostly had it equipped just because it's really good and fun to use, even though I mostly tried to just focus on backslide in my test hunts. But just randomly one day, an idea popped into my head and I had to try it out immediately. What we're going to do is equip Adamant Charge Slash in our other Silkbind slot. Now check this out. We can use Adamant Charge Slash to close the distance and charge up a strong charge slash. But before releasing it, let's do a backslide. And now we have a fully charged true charge slash. This combo sounds particularly appealing to me because Adamant Charge Slash allows us to get our charging done with knockback resistance. Then we simply need to backslide and now that charge is transferred to the strongest attack. This may be a bit slow, but it does seem like it allows a lot of flexibility for making sure that our attacks land. We are of course giving up Strong Arm Stance for this particular combo, but we could almost think of both moves as providing us a path to our strongest attacks. With Strong Arm Stance, we are able to get the attack out faster, but only if we can absorb a hit first. This method that I just showed you on the other hand takes longer, but we can still do our attack even if we don't take a hit. It's a bit of an interesting trade-off to consider, so I think this combo is worth checking out. Alright, so that should now wrap up all of what I wanted to cover about the backslide. Oh boy, Well folks, it happened again. I just had all my voiceover recorded for this video, and when I was recording my training room footage, I just had to learn something else that seems potentially game-changing for this skill. So remember how I showed you that you could backslide after landing a charge slash to execute the next level of charge slash? Okay, well take a look at this now. First, let's fully charge up the first slash and throw it out. Alright, now let's backslide and try to do the follow-ups. Interesting, so both the strong charge and true charge slashes were unable to be fully charged. So this seems weird and not very good because we are losing damage on the stronger attacks. But now let's start by doing a fully charged strong charge slash. And now to backslide after that. Whoa, now the true charge slash is fully charged too. So this is extremely interesting because that is 2 powerful attacks you can do in a row. And even better, if we use Adamant charge slash, we can do a similar version of our previously mentioned combo, but we can just land both hits instead of skipping the first one. Okay, so this technique seems extremely good and I definitely think it's worth checking out. But now between me having to rework this video multiple times and then the new title update coming out, this video has ended up being delayed quite a bit. Since I don't want to have to redo this video too much more, I will just include one extra segment of me trying out this new technique at the end of my demo clips. Alright, with that, please enjoy the rest of the video. Alright, so that should now wrap up all of what I wanted to cover about the backslide. Now I have recorded a series of test hunts that I ran attempting to make decent use of this move, so now let's take a look at some clips from these and see how I was able to apply what I learned in practice. Okay, so for my test hunts, I decided to pick some targets that would give me a decent bit of challenge, but would still be relatively easy for me to read, so I could properly test out my various techniques. For that reason, I ended up choosing some low-level anomaly monsters for my hunts. As it turns out, this was a rather bold decision because even the weaker of these monsters are quite a lot to handle, especially when you aren't an expert with your weapon. The first one I tried, Royal Ludroth, ended up being a bit of a painful hunt. Still, I managed to learn a few things from this hunt, so let's see a few key moments. At the very start here, I do in fact activate Power Sheath before switching scrolls. And to my surprise, on my first try, I am able to somewhat pull off a decent use of the backslide. To be fair though, I am given a pretty generous window during the Enrage animation to land my full combo. The true charge doesn't hit that hard though, and I believe that has to do with the part that I am hitting. I definitely want to be aiming for the weak parts to do the most damage with this weapon. Now here's an example of what ended up happening to me more often in this hunt. Here, I do a pretty decent backslide to avoid an attack, and seeing a follow-up, I do a second backslide to avoid that. Unfortunately, I completely whiff my final hit, but if I was angled better, I may have been able to land it. We will see many situations where I just barely whiff my attacks, and I'm sure some of it is being unlucky, but it may also have to do with your timing and spacing, which is definitely something you can improve with practice. In this situation here, I actually make a good use of dodging at an angle to get into a better position. I do, however, unfortunately make the mistake of overcharging my final hit because I hadn't yet understood the charge transfer, and I ended up hitting a not very good hit zone, but still this is better than nothing. Overall, my first hunt was a bit of a mess though, but I did begin to get a grasp on how to properly space my backslides. For my next target, I have chosen an Afflicted Rathian, which is a monster that I am very familiar with the patterns of. Of course, being afflicted, I still have to keep on my toes. I start the hunt with a couple uses of the Strong Arm stance just because it is a very good option to use against roars. Up next, however, I am able to pull off some backslides to avoid a series of multiple attacks. This is one situation where the backslide is more useful because we can use this move twice to avoid 2 attacks instead of only being able to block 1 with Strong Arm stance. Here's another situation where we're able to quickly backslide twice in order to avoid a series of attacks. Since I know that Rathian loves to do multiple follow-ups, I was able to predict the attacks and properly avoid them. I do still end up overcharging the final hit, but the damage is still quite nice since we actually hit the head. By the way, did you notice that our attacks following the backslide have been doing mounting damage? I didn't notice this at first, but the follow-up attack from Backslide is counted as part of the Silkbind, so we can see it deal that blue highlighted damage that can cause a wyvern ride. By this point, I do think I had started to get a slightly better grasp on how to reposition with the Backslide. We can see that I still need to work on my hit zone targeting though. Okay, now that whiff just hurt me. For the next couple hunts, I chose a Daimyo Hermitaur as my target, and I found this fellow to be pretty good for timing my moves against. At first, it took me a bit to get used to the delays on its attacks, but once I got the hang of it, it was pretty satisfying to dodge. It's also around now where I started realizing that my charge would preserve across the backslide, as I did it a few times by accident. Here's probably my best performance from these hunts. Still didn't get the best hit zones, but this felt pretty good. And here's a little bonus clip. I was real proud of myself for my use of the camera in timing this dodge. Okay, real quick before we come to some conclusions, I wanted to try out my combo of Adamant Charge slash plus Backslide, so I did a few hunts with those. I chose a Juratotus as my target for these hunts because I felt it would be a nice punching bag for me to practice on. This was a mistake. At least when afflicted, this monster ended up being real squirmy, so I whiffed so many attacks. In addition, Juratotus appears to be almost entirely bad hit zones, so we will see so many hard-earned attacks hitting for pathetic numbers. It did appear that the head could be hit for decent damage, but I could barely hit it, so these hunts went quite long. In our first clip here, we can see this combo almost working as intended, but I unfortunately whiffed the True Charge slash. In the next clip, I do manage to just barely land one, and end up having some success landing some follow-up attacks as well. Still, these numbers aren't great because we aren't hitting that head. Really, the biggest impact these hunts had on me, however, was the number of times that I just barely whiffed my True Charge slash. It felt like that I did everything right, but the hit ended up being just a little bit off. I don't think that this is really the fault of the combo though, because my positioning felt quite good when I was using it. As I've said before, it may really just come down to practice, both learning the monster behaviors and understanding how to properly space your attacks. But because that first hunt beat me up so bad, I wanted to do one last one, but this time swapping True Charge slash for Rage slash. With Rage slash, we are giving up some damage for the ability to aim our attack in any direction. Upon trying this out, I immediately noticed that I am landing my hits much more often, although the damage numbers are a bit sadder. Still, landing hits is better than nothing. Overall, I would have preferred to hit the head more often, but I did get a slightly faster time at least. I would say that the Rage Slash was a bit better for ease of use, but with some practice, I could imagine being able to do some awesome stuff with the True Charge Slash. Alright, it is now time for our cool new segment where I tried out the new technique that I was just recently made aware of. As a reminder, this involves doing a backslide after a fully charged strong charge slash in order to give us an instant fully charged final slash. So it took me a little bit to get used to the timings, but let me say that this tech feels crazy good. At first, I wasn't able to land too many hits on an angry monster, but despite that, the moment I was given some downtime, I started absolutely destroying. Against a downed or tired monster, it feels like an amazing option for getting out tons of damage. As I did these couple hunts, I felt that I was able to improve drastically. By the end of my session, I was able to start avoiding attacks and countering really fluidly. Here's an extended clip where I felt absolutely in the zone. I think my biggest takeaway is that I did the best when I combined many different techniques. For example, my use of the tackle here allowed me to land my biggest hit, which I had originally set up with the backslide. I also feel like in these hunts I was able to more effectively reposition my backslide to put me in the best spot. By the way, don't forget that we can also use our backslide after a normal strong charge slash to get that max true charge. I mostly was using the Adamant charge slash for this, but a regular strong charge works great too. Anyways, I ended up having a lot of fun with this technique and I definitely want to try to incorporate it into my greatsword play in the future. Alright, I think it's about time for me to summarize my thoughts and give a conclusion on the skill. First, I would not consider backslide a core skill for the weapon, but instead just another tool to be used to assist with your timing and positioning. I would not consider the skill a replacement for others like strong arm stance or the tackle. Instead, I think they all have slightly different use cases, so you should pick the right one for the job. As for whether or not this skill is worth replacing over Power Sheath, I could see a case to be made to have both equipped. It's really not that hard to swap scrolls to use Power Sheath, so if you can remember to keep it up, I'd say go for it. As for the combo with Adamant Charge Slash, I definitely think there's some potential there. With the first version of the combo I showed, I feel that ended up being pretty situational. I'd say it has some decent usage to get safely to your final slash, but only if a monster's timing will line up with it. However, the ability to chain 2 level 3 charges by backsliding after your strong charge feels extremely powerful, and is definitely something I will be trying to use more in the future. Overall, I would say backslide is definitely worth checking out. I know my greatsword skills aren't that good, but playing with the backslide has added an interesting new layer to the weapon and is making me want to continue to improve my skills with it. So that is basically it for this video. Let me know if you've tried this skill out and if you've managed to do anything cool with it. Following this video will be 4 more that will cover different switch skills that I feel may have been overlooked. If there is, however, another switch skill or weapon technique that you would like to know more about and haven't seen any videos covering, feel free to suggest it and I'd be happy to make more videos like this in the future. Alright, well with that, thank you very much for watching and I hope to see you again soon.